The world of thermal is currently exploding right now. In 2026, you have a ton of options from companies like D&T, OneLeaf, and Infinitac under $2,000. And $2,000 sounds like an absolute boatload of money, but you're talking about technology that was at one point in the tens of thousands of dollars, and militaries were only the ones utilizing them. So for consumers to be able to have access to these types of tools is pretty unprecedented. I'm pretty much coming from the same perspective that you, the viewer, are if you're watching this, which is extremely limited use case in the world of thermal. I'm not a coyote hunter. I'm also not anyone that's been in the military. So I had to do a lot of research and exposure into this world to be able to understand what the hell is going on. Now, the elephant in the room here is that most of the options that we're going to be looking at or that you're going to be considering are Chinese manufactured. And I know there's a lot of folks that have issues with that because they want to buy something American made. But what we're experiencing right now is almost what I'm calling a Chinese race to the bottom when it comes to the fact that these are becoming more and more feature packed, better made, and they're actually dropping in price. So unlike the world of night vision where there's scarcity when it comes to how many tubes are being able to be manufactured and which ones are going to be prioritized for military use, you don't have that issue in the thermal market. And so because of that, you are seeing these go down and down. To be clear, if there were an American option at this price point, I likely wouldn't even be testing these, but there isn't. So this is about navigating being a prepared citizen in the world and circumstances we're actually in. I care more about providing good information to my fellow Americans than I do about steering you towards options you'll never realistically afford. American-made thermals are often $4,000, $8,000, or $10,000 plus, and most men just don't have that budget. There's also another issue when it comes to the quality of existing reviews that are out there for a lot of these units. Half of the time, if not more, you're just getting footage of a cow or a dog at 10 yards away, and you can see, oh wow, the color and the contrast of the fur is just incredible. Or you're seeing action cam footage of a coyote getting its head blown off, which is really not my niche. So really the intent of this video, and likely a few future videos, is going to be, what does it look like to go into the world of thermal with essentially no exposure? I'm not going to be hiding the fact that I'm not a professional or know every single spec on these devices, but I can take you through what's important, essentially what matters. And along the way, I can do and review a couple of these thermal options that are on the market. Today, we're going to be mostly talking about the OneLeaf, which is a dedicated thermal scope with a 640 sensor.
Alright, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of this specific thermal being discussed today, we should first take a big step back and use this opportunity to level set what roles and what capability I personally find thermal useful for. There's a multitude of forms you can find thermals in, ranging from helmet worn to dedicated long-range scopes. For my personal use case, as a prepared citizen and a scope carbine truther, I believe the most practical as a handheld, clip-on, and third as a dedicated scope. The first and only thermal I owned prior to this channel was a FLIR Scout 320 handheld that was being discontinued and blown out for about $500 in summer of 2024. While it served as a good introduction to the world of thermal, I found the sensor underwhelming and the lack of focus adjustment limited. I sold it within a year since I believed the 640 revolution was coming and was eventually going to tank all the lower resolution devices on the secondhand market. Thermals, whether we want to admit it or not, are pretty integral as a tool, as both an observation device and as part of the designated marksman's toolkit. They sort of became a meme a few years back because Grantham had that one over the top line in his urban survival video during COVID.
If you don't have thermal, you're going to die to somebody who does use thermal.
I don't have that much personal interest in helmet-mounted thermals or thermals that are designed like rifle scopes. Ew. Pairing thermals with night vision on a helmet seems like a vomit fest waiting to happen. It's more realistic to simply keep the thermal on body and use it as an observation tool while stationary as needed, rather than limiting yourself with a 1x thermal and adding further weight to your helmet. Thermal also doesn't really shine as a navigation tool like night vision, which does the job so much better. Laying out the particulars, the ideal thermal in my opinion is a high-res 640 sensor with laser range-finding capability and fairly low magnification in order to be used as a clip-on. Note that last part down because we're going to circle back to it later in the video. When discussing the realistic use cases, we should all take a deep breath and remember that we're technically in a stable time without widespread domestic conflict or unrest. So, in this civil state, your realistic use case is most likely recreationally. For instance, being able to spot deer and wildlife with it. Beyond that, having fun out on the range and public land with this and the boys. But if we were to discuss civil unrest applications, which is probably what you're here for, you're much more likely to be able to use this in a community reconnaissance or observation role than picking off Venezuelans American sniper style when they invade the country. A truly underrated and unsexy configuration for thermal applications is buying a $40 Arca to Picatinny adapter, setting up your thermal on a tripod, and posting up in a spotter role watching your main access road for 4 hours straight to ensure there's no shenanigans overnight. I'm serious too. You're more likely to be valuable in a community crisis for your ability to observe and report than you are to ever get into a heroic gunfight. I plan to discuss this in more detail in the future and hope to provide a wide array of footage showcasing thermal use in common urban settings. Alternatively, you could use this almost exactly in the same configuration at first light to try to spot deer or elk during hunting season.
There was a couple ground rules I wanted to set when it came to my review and evaluation of these types of devices. One of the more important ones being that I didn't want to do any of the shooting during the daytime. I really don't like when you go and take a look at a review on one of these and the only footage is of someone just shooting off of a 308 on a bench in the middle of the daylight at a paper target. It really doesn't do a whole lot for you in terms of the evaluation, and so you're going to be so excited when you buy one of these types of things that you're most likely to be going off in the middle of the night and wanting to shoot it immediately. And so I wanted to make sure, hey, how do you zero these things? Not just conveniently during the day, but how is it to zero this at night? The other thing I wanted to do was only shoot at night as well, and I wanted to make sure that I was shooting in variable positions, shooting on a tripod, whether it was standing or kneeling, shooting in the prone, stuff that you would do in matches or training, and once again, not bench position shooting when you have a big gulp right next to you.
So enter into the OneLeaf.AI. No, this isn't a niche 90s anime or a boba food chain. They're an optics manufacturer focused on night vision applications. They initially reached out to me to see if I had any interest in evaluating this Mars MT1000LRF, which fortunately for them, I've been cooking up all of this philosophy of use in my head schizo style well before any company has reached out to me. The spark notes of this device is that it's a dedicated thermal scope that doubles as a great handheld device.
I should also note that OneLeaf let me keep this unit, but if keeping a product ever required me to soften criticism, I just wouldn't even go for it. To go a step further, there aren't going to be any affiliate links on this either. That's just not my bag, and this isn't really a long-term review of the thermal. This is a technology I find interesting and useful enough to share with you at this point in time. Nothing more, nothing less.
As far as the specific specs go, the thermal sensor is a 640 by 512, 12 micron, full color 1024 by 768 OLED display with an adjustable 30, 50, or 60 hertz refresh rate. It also has the ability to record video and sound. It's IP67 waterproof, rated up to 308 caliber, and includes a 3-year warranty. The real and unique defining feature of this optic that sets it apart from the rest is that it has interchangeable lenses that can be swapped out. They currently offer 3 lens sizes, including a 35mm lens that has a base mag of 2 power, meaning it's got a digital zoom up to 16. A 50mm lens with a base mag of 2.8 power goes up to 22x, and a 75mm lens that includes a 5 power base magnification that could go up to 40 digital zoom. I requested that OneLeaf send me a 35mm and a 50mm lens so I could test reliability and ease of use. When ordering, you can purchase one or a combination of 2 of these at once. Price starts to creep up the larger you go in lens size. As far as the mounts go, the scope comes with a simple non-QD setup. However, they also offer 2 different QD mounts. I think this is essential for a civilian use application I laid out because you really want to be able to easily throw this on or off a rifle, tripod, or keep it in a pouch. With the 35mm lens and the QD mount installed, the entire setup weighs about 24.7 ounces to my scale, which isn't exactly light. For reference, the D&T Hydra comes in at 19.2 ounces with their QD mount. With the 50mm lens installed, the package goes up another 2.5 ounces to 27.3 ounces. Swapping the lenses is straightforward, with step 1 being to make sure that the thermal is off, dummy. There's a nub on the right side of the thermal that you pull back. At that point, you twist the lens to the left and it unclicks. Attaching the new thermal is essentially the same steps: add pressure, twist right. Full disclosure, I found the swappability lives up to the hype, and I never had any functionality issues. Every time I swapped lenses, the unit turned on and displayed each base magnification reliably. Each lens has an adjustable diopter with a borderline throw lever that was a pleasant ergonomic surprise. I didn't get a chance to test if you retain zero upon swapping lenses, so that's something I'll need to follow up on. However, I did have varying levels of difficulty when trying to reinstall new lenses. Seems like you have to have it just at the right angle and pressure to twist it back on. It's also easy to start screwing it on and then be twisting your diopter on accident. I had to remind myself on a couple occasions to not monkey grip a $2,000 thermal. I had the most trouble when out in the dark in 20-degree weather, so your mileage may vary, especially if you love doing this in the cozy warmth of your home. The thermal unit uses a removable 18650 battery, which is nice considering a lot of you already have a bunch of these on hand. The battery provides 5 hours of runtime, which I can attest is fairly accurate considering I've exclusively used this thermal during winter here in Idaho, in sub 35 degree conditions. The lowest temperature this thermal was tested in was 5 degrees with no issues. The battery is also chargeable within the device by using a power cable, which I found myself doing quite often. For memory, you get a removable microSD 64GB chip, which I found really useful when paired with a USB adapter. It was convenient to be able to pull out the chip, pair this with a USB device, and then plug it directly into my phone to save the clips versus going over Wi-Fi like a lot of other thermals. This thermal features 4 buttons and a rotating dial. That might not sound like a lot of options, but brother, let me tell you, I've seen far less than that with infinitely more confusion and button mashing on other thermals. The side button is your power on, standby, power off. I enjoy the fact that this is on the side because I never accidentally turn the thermal off while trying to do something else. The 3 buttons on top are for recording, taking a photo, adjusting your scene mode, screen brightness, or changing color palettes. The device features 11 different color palettes. On the surface, that sounds awesome. More is always better, right? Well, it would do you well to learn that a subset of your color palette options look like an absolute acid trip. I mean, seriously, look at this. I will say, although it's not real analog night vision, this palette does go harder than it has any right to. It can be a pain to cycle through the options, especially if you push the button too fast, which means the cycling lags and then you accidentally skip over the palette that you are aiming towards. Then you have to cycle all over again. Ask me how I know. I'd say it would be more worthwhile in an update for OneLeaf to allow users to be able to disable palettes. If that were the case, I'd probably only select 4 to 5 on rotation. Similar to the color palettes, this device has a unique ability to change scene modes, labeled as snow, rain, fog, forest, and city. I appreciate the inclusion of these options as they give you the ability to really dial in the right image picture for your specific environment. I just wish OneLeaf provided more instruction on the different weather displays. The way you realistically learn about it is go through each one and simply decide, yep, this one looks the best. The top dial has the ability to both click and rotate. This is the most intuitive part of the thermal. You're primarily using this for laser rangefinding, digital magnification, and to navigate settings. This top dial makes magnifying easy and similar to the power button in the sense that you're never accidentally using this to access a different feature. I will say straight up that I fear that this is a vulnerable or possible failure point if your firearm takes a hard fall on the optic. It's possible that this would break off or crush into the body of the thermal. By clicking the top dial, you access the laser rangefinder. I was able to test this successfully as far as 850 meters away at a herded deer. OneLeaf advertises 1300 yard capability, so take that for what it's worth. The clickability, if you want to call it, of this dial is quite sensitive, so I found myself accidentally clicking it when trying to zoom in. One interesting note is that I went into this evaluation thinking that an LRF was a neat add-on, but as I spent more time with it, I've become convinced that it's a feature that's essential for thermals. Really, you're neutering thermal capabilities when you don't have the ability to range distances at whatever you're trying to identify or engage in complete darkness at night. It's not like you can just use your thermal to identify and then switch over to your standard laser rangefinder. This is even more critical with these optics that have higher image quality and magnification that allow you to see out further. While we're peripherally on the topic, I suppose, another anecdote you all might enjoy is seeing what the IR signature looks like on this device. I was fortunate enough to have a friend who drove out at distance one evening under nods to showcase just how hilariously massive your laser rangefinder becomes under IR. This footage is at approximately 500 meters, and as you can see, at various points it looks like the laser is lighting up half the truck. If we push into 300 meters, you can also see what the ocular brightness does under IR. I tilted the lens from straight at my friend to 90 degrees away. At the right angle, the visible light from your display definitely can be seen under nods. Another piece de resistance. As far as image quality and digital zoom is concerned, I've been overall impressed with the thermal. Throughout this video, I've been including footage I've gathered over the last few months. Generally speaking, I find the image quality and resolution at native magnification, which is 2x and 2.8x, for each of the lenses to be pleasant viewing experience. It's unreal how easy it is to pick up and identify wildlife. Within the video footage I've shown you over the last 15 minutes, I'd argue you've been able to somewhat easily identify humans, deer, and cattle anywhere from 100, 300, 400, 500, and 800 meters away. Typically, I found myself zooming in no more than 3 or 4 power digitally. On the 35mm lens, that means it's about 6 to 8 power, or 11 power with the 50mm lens. After that, image quality really starts to fall apart and you get choppy pixelation. In the harshest cold weather conditions I've used this in, being sub 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you could also see image distortion around the edges of the image. Between the two lenses, I didn't really find much of a massive difference in viewing experience. I found myself favoring the 35mm lens because I think that lower magnification lends itself a bit better as a handheld. All things considered, and somewhat shockingly, this thermal seems to be almost everything OneLeaf advertises it is. If you go with their 35mm lens, 64GB SD card, QD mount, and a spare battery, you're currently looking at a total price of about $1,500. That's sort of unreal for a genuine 640 thermal. Add on the 50mm lens and it's another $600. I view thermal devices as something that's infinitely more valuable than owning that third rifle or pistol. Hell, it's even more likely to be valuable than the second rifle. So for the price of a BCM or a tricked out competition handgun, you're now able to enter into the thermal space and be able to detect, identify, range, and engage out hundreds of meters away. As far as my personal takeaways and things I'd like to see OneLeaf incorporate, well, my biggest ask is for them to include an option within the settings for a clip-on mode. The 35mm lens with a 2-power base is low enough that it's worth it for folks like myself. Whether it's an LPVO compatibility or using a 2-10 or 2-12, the market's already headed in that direction. It'll be hard to compete with something like the D&T Hydra HS635R without that feature. In fact, the dimensions of both of these units are fairly similar. Piggybacking off of that other point, I think they could make more of their swappable lens capabilities. I'd really like to see a lens optimized for 1 power, so maybe that's a 19mm lens, in order to be released to be optimized for clip-on use. Now, I may be talking totally out of my ass here, or there might be tech limitations that make it impossible, but this would allow them to be able to creep into that IRA 1-4 territory for clip-on use. Lastly, they just need an option to be able to remove some of those damn color palettes. There are just way too many, and if you accidentally click that button, it takes a while to get back. So ultimately, this device is one option in the Chinese thermal arms race to the bottom. This arms race explains why there's so many new options that exist, why the prices keep going down, and why the feature sets are exploding. The end result is that normal people can now access capabilities that used to be reserved for governments. So what you're seeing is a race to the bottom, not necessarily a race in quality, but in price per pixel. I should also note that I've also been evaluating the D&T Hydra in this same time that I've been using the OneLeaf, so stay tuned for a future upcoming video where we'll be doing a deep dive on the unit and providing side-by-side footage for both. John 15, verses 13 through 15. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything I have learned from my Father I have made known to you. I love this verse. It has so many of the principles that I think so many of us are drawn to. Principles of sacrifice for our friends and our family, discussing how to respect someone is to give them the full picture and to give them information freely. I hope you're inspired by this and can take this into your new year.